it's important to, when we look at so many different issues that are involved in immigration, that we put everything into careful perspective. I'm just going to speak for myself here, but I think I do speak for many others. We know that most people who came to the United States on visitors' visas for vacations, go to Disney World or see the Grand Canyon, then violated the promises they made on their visas and overstayed their visas. We know that most of these people, almost none of these people, come over to this country to harm us physically. That's about 40% of the illegal aliens in this country, came here as tourists or as students. The other 60%, a high percentage of those, came across the border illegally. Most of them today, in order to get across the border, who controls that border on the other side? And it's the drug cartels. But we know even most of them are not coming here to harm us, and hardly any of them end up harming us. But we do not have a system that actually can protect us from those that do. And this is the Remembrance Project. Is so important to remind us that some people bear an incredible loss and burden for the fact that George H.W. Bush, President Clinton, President George W. Bush, President Obama have held our country hostage on the basis they will not give us full border security. They will not give us workplace security unless we go along with massive amnesties and massive increases in more foreign labor. They could give us security. They could give us workplace security and they could give us border security. But no, they say we'll give it to you only under the conditions of blackmail. That's the situation we're in. We want Congressman Cantor to not give in to that blackmail. Congressman Steve King has come all the way from Iowa, although he occasionally comes to Washington, D.C., pretty close by. We're awfully glad to have you here tonight. Finish it up for us, Congressman.
Well, thank you, Roy, and I thank all of you for being out here tonight, and I thank our speakers. And for me, yes, it was a little bit of a trip over here from Iowa this morning, but I will tell you that each one of the speakers that I've heard here tonight alone made it worth the trip. Ron Maxwell, I want to read every word of what you delivered here tonight, and I want to internalize it. Thank you. Roy Beck has led on this for 23 years. He put together the gumball equation that illustrated this for me back in the 90s sometime, and I still have that VCR in my archives. But of all the things that were said here tonight, I have to turn over to Laura, and Laura is the one that brought this thing home in the most painful way, in the most realistic way that I've been talking about as a matter of data for some years. But I've also met other families that have gone through similar kinds of pain, and how for Laura to come here and relive this again and pour her heart out in front of all of us is one of the hardest things. It's the worst thing, that it's a parent's worst nightmare, and to relive that nightmare because she wants to avoid this for other mothers, for other fathers, for other families. Her son Josh going through that. Now, this is explained away. This individual pain is explained away by the advocates for amnesty. They say, well, there's going to be violence in any civilization. It's just a matter of happenstance, just as if it was a car wreck. But there are people in control of perpetrating that violence, and there are people in control or not in control of those vehicles that bring about car wrecks, that bring about the fatalities of our family members. I remember an accident of a school bus in Cottonwood, Minnesota, in southwest Minnesota a few years ago. An illegal alien had encountered the law several times and ran across and violated the law and ran into a school bus and rolled that school bus into the ditch. And 4 kids in that school bus were killed. And I made the point, if we enforce our immigration laws, that individual isn't there to cause that accident. And any family member knows their child would be alive if we'd enforce the law. For the Belize individual that committed that heinous murder against Laura's son Josh, for the driver of that vehicle that killed 4 of those students in that school bus in Cottonwood, Minnesota, for the illegal OWI alien that killed Ray Tranchant's daughter and her best friend, for the illegal alien that murdered Jamil Shaw's and his wife's little son Jazz because they went out on the hunt for some young black man to kill. These stories are not just, it's not only Laura, it's not only Ray Tronchen, it's not only the kids at Cottonwood, it's not only Jazz Shaw who was killed in California. That's just a handful of names that I can roll off the front of my mind because I've heard these stories from these individuals. But here's some numbers. 25,064 criminal aliens were incarcerated first arrested for homicide that were in our prisons through that period of time only from 2004 till 2008. That snapshot, that's some data from a study that I had commissioned, a GAO study that was published in either March or April of 2011. I've had 2 of those studies done because I wanted to know what's the price to American lives because we're not enforcing American law. 25,064. If you're arrested for homicide, you count that as a fatality, a victim of homicide. 25,064 isn't the full universe. It's possible that they were arrested for homicide and convicted of something else, but it's unlikely that there were fewer victims than 25,064 for that period of time. It's been 5 years since then, more than the length of the time of that study. The study was only 4 years. It's been 5 years since then. We don't know what that number is, but any logical mind will guarantee you that that number approaches much closer to ×2 than it does something equal or less than 25,064. And I remember the exact number, 25,064, because I know when I read that, that's an individual. Everyone is an individual. It's not roughly 25,000. These are personal tragedies for families that love their children, love their husband, love their wife. And they're taken from us and they're scattered across the cemeteries in America without fanfare, without really much hitting the news. And for example, in my home territory, I happened to pick up the paper, and this is not a homicide. This is perhaps vehicular, but it wasn't charged that way. There was a couple that were on the gravel road in the morning, and they were hit in a head-on collision. And this couple happened to have a last name that I recognized. And so I asked a few questions to find out what happened. It was a fatality, a man and a wife that were in their early 70s, killed in a wreck on a gravel road in Iowa. Who was the other driver? You'll recognize the last name, the surname, and go and ask the questions. Was he a legal individual or an illegal individual? I know the sheriff, I know the law enforcement officers, and when I go and ask them, they go, well, we really don't talk about that. It was a fatality and he was working for a local operation there. What's he doing now? I think working for the same operation. But pain after pain after pain and suffering, not marked, not added, not chronicled, except 25,064. Times what? Times 1 point something, times 2 point something? We don't know. But it isn't just a random selection of a population of 315 or 16 million people. Here's what happens. America has its own violent rate here. And it's higher than some of the rest of the civilized world, but it's lower than much of the rest of the world. The time that I looked at this data and committed it to memory a few years ago, America's violent death rate was 4.6 per 100,000. That's the violent death rate in America and what it was then. It's moved a little bit since then. So I wondered, what is it as you go south? So I turned to Mexico and asked the question. 13.2 violent deaths per 100,000, triple the rate of America. That's not the highest violent death rate in that part of the world. It gets more dangerous the further south you go. Honduras, 9 times the violent death rate of America. And El Salvador, no rate because apparently it's so high that they won't publish it. That's just my guess. You go to Colombia, and it's gotten a little better in Colombia. Their violent death rate was 15.3 times the violent death rate in America. Now think what that is. If you bring people from a violent civilization into a less violent civilization, you're going to have more violence, right? It's like pouring hot water into cold water. Does it raise the temperature or not? And then, if you take young men, primarily young men from that population, well, we know that the American population has a higher violent rate among young men. In any universe of any society, civilization, that's true. Pull out a bunch of young men and bring them out of a violent environment, a violent culture, and put them into this one, you're going to see the temperature go up again, more violence. And then, Watch the drug trade pour across our southern border. 80 to 90% of the illegal drugs consumed in America come from or through Mexico. From or through Mexico. And so you know that many young, primarily men, but also increasingly young women are involved in this drug trade. We know that in Mexico, the drug cartels are recruiting kids as young as 11 years old, boys and girls, to strap drugs on their body, whether it's high-value drugs to their torso or whether it's a lot of volume and some weight and marijuana to their back, and come across the desert or sneak through the ports of entry to come into America. So if you tie up to a violent society with young men who are more violent, who are involved in the drug trade, and then you're going to have a higher rate of violence in this country. 25,064 that we know. Every one a painful personal tragedy. How does that compare? How many Americans have been killed in Iraq and Afghanistan put together? Several thousand. That number's, I believe, more than 6,000. I don't know that it's more than 7. I think we're in that area, and there are tragedies too. And I've been to many of their graves, and I've held their families too. And yes, my shirt's been cried wet. Both cases, victims of criminal aliens and those who lost a family member standing up to defend our country. Each case is tragic. It is as painful for our country. The violent death rate that exists today is higher in America because of the illegal immigration that we have. And it's a simple equation for us. I grew up in a society where my father was in law enforcement. And he taught me this, that we are the America of the rule of law. And you shall abide by the law. And if you don't agree with the law, there's a means to change it. You can either go talk to your legislators or you can run for office and talk as one of them. It was part of the guidance that he gave me. But when you reward people for breaking the law, you get more law breakers. Ronald Reagan said, he had a couple of visions on this, but when he got to the amnesty plan in 1986, and I was trying to raise my little family and run my little business, and I wasn't involved in politics, but I watched this story unfold. And of all the debate that was going on in the House and the Senate, I believed all along that the very principled man, Ronald Reagan, would veto that Amnesty Act of 1986 because clearly he would have seen that you can't sacrifice the rule of law on the altar of political expediency and think you're going to have a positive result on the other end. And from 1986 on, what have we been doing? Trying to reconstruct the rule of law, trying to put it back up there again where it was before 1986, because I knew that if we were not able to restore the rule of law after 86, that we could never enforce it over time on immigration. Now, where are we today? Remember what happened. 86, there were supposed to be 700,000 to 800,000 people that were going to get amnesty. At least Reagan was honest when he signed the Amnesty Act. That number got estimated on up to 1 million, then about 1.2 million, and it turned out to be something between 3 and 3.8 million people because of fraud, because of corruption, because of document fraud, which, by the way, there are some people in this country now that are pretty good at that. But Ronald Reagan signed it because of political expediency. He believed he was going to get law enforcement cooperation in exchange for waiving the rule of law and granting amnesty to that 1 million that became 3 million. And look what's happened. Now that implied promise of amnesty has brought more and more people into America. And we've had on the border no border enforcement, low border enforcement, no will, at least, to restore the rule of law. Yes, they stopped some, then they turned them back. We checked down at the station at Tucson sector, and this has been just a few years ago. There was one individual that had been encountered 27 times, photographed and fingerprinted, 27 times trying to cross in the same sector of the border. Was he that inept? But he kept coming back. And there was no price to be paid, which is why he came back. And if you would go down there and watch the attitude, they know what they're doing. They walk through, there's a smug look on their face. They're saying, you can't do anything to touch me. I can keep trying until I get to stay. I had a farmer talk to me the other day, and he said, you need to hear this story, Congressman, because I've had face on with the real immigration story in Iowa. I hired a landscaper to come to my place and help me landscape around my house. First, I didn't grow up around a generation of farmers that hired landscapers, but he did. And it rained him out. So he went in and sat down in the kitchen with this fella who was from Mexico. And here's the story. He said, I came into the United States when I was 19 years old. Yes, I entered illegally. I went to Chicago and I worked these menial tasks for cash. I would go stand out there with the rest of the day labor and we'd go out and do a few hours work. And he said, over time, I saved $250. And when I got $250 cash, I knew what to do. I went down to this place in Chicago with my money, and I traded that money. I paid them for a Social Security card, a driver's license. I presume it also was a fake birth certificate, but he didn't actually say that. So now he's documented. The undocumented is documented, and then he could go get a better job and make more money. And we've got people that think, I need somebody to take care of my lawn, so this is the kind of people we need in America. Seriously, who benefits from illegal labor in America? Who are the beneficiaries? Well, first of all, you have elitists. These aren't middle-class people by definition, elitists. And elitists are people that live in gated communities. This is generally speaking. Now, I'm going to just go ahead and stereotype them, and it's probably not politically correct, but they're not necessarily protected by the left's PC police. So, they live in gated communities. They send their kids to Ivy League schools. They have nice big houses and beautiful lawns and gardens. And you know, if you have all of that stuff, it takes more time to take care of than you've got time if you're an elitist. So you've got to have somebody to clean your house, clean your toilets, make the beds, do the cooking, mow the lawn, take care of the garden. And you know what? If you're going to live at the standard you want, that takes cheap labor. So what would you do if you didn't have a servant class and you had a mansion to take care of? Well, you'd probably advocate for cheap labor. You'd advocate for an amnesty act that set it up so there's an endless supply of cheap labor, legalize some that are here, open the door so there's more that's coming, and you can just perpetually pick up people around the globe that will come and take care of your home. That's fine if you've got a lock for the gate. It's fine if your kids can go to Ivy League schools and move back into their own gated community. You want to live up here in the elitist class. They're beneficiaries of cheap labor. Second group, Democrat power brokers. They know what this turns into. My Republican friends have told me for years, don't talk about the political side of this thing because we don't want people to think that we're against amnesty because we're afraid of this politically. Well, why not just go ahead and tell the truth? The truth is, if you look at the data, I mean, I know, and speaking of people that come generally out of the southern part of the south of the United States, we know people that are good entrepreneurs, good family members, good church goers. Yes, they make good citizens for America. They're good. They can start businesses and take care of their family, and they dress their kids for church better than we dress our kids for church. That all makes me happy. But when I look at the data, I find out that they really aren't statistically pro-life. They aren't statistically pro-marriage. They aren't statistically for, I'd say, the free enterprise system that requires more personal responsibility and less taxes and less government. They want more government and more services. That data is all out there. So what do you think they turn into? People that empower the Democrat power brokers is what they turn into if you give them a chance to vote. And that means that the beneficiaries are Democrat power brokers, and of course the elitists for cheap labor. Now the third one are employers of illegal labor. Employers of cheap. By the way, if you have knowingly and willfully employed illegal labor, you get amnesty too under the Gang of Eights bill. So as I said earlier, the perpetual and retroactive amnesty isn't just for those who are here illegally. It's for everybody that would come here illegally, everybody that would overstay their visa, everybody that's been deported unless they were a felon, and anybody that's committed any laws associated with hiring illegal aliens, knowingly and willfully, because after all, that's a pardonable sin. No, it's not pardonable. We heard Laura's tragedy. It's not pardonable. It's not forgivable if you knowingly and willfully perpetuate this on our society and our country and our culture. It's not, especially when you think about the rule of law as an essential pillar of American exceptionalism. And if you think how Moses brought the law down from the mount, and it went to Greece, and it went to Rome, and Roman law protected Jesus for a little while in front of the high priest Caiaphas, and it went to Western Europe, and it came to this country as Old English common law right out here. Jamestown, 1607 in May, is when they put the sign up inside the church. It's inside the church that's there today that said, here, Old English common law came to the New World. The rule of law was an essential foundation of the great United States of America. We could not be a great nation if we did not have the rule of law, and those who envision its destruction with regard to immigration have no vision for what kind of country we would have. This Gang of Eight Amnesty Act does not account for what happens when you grant this perpetual amnesty, but it destroys the rule of law, at least with regard to immigration, and we could never restore it again. Never again. If we can't restore the rule of law after Reagan's little old 1986 Amnesty Act, we'll never see it restored with regard to immigration in our lifetimes again. And it's too important. If you're going to build a nation around freedom of speech, religion, and the press, and the right to keep and bear arms, and no double jeopardy, a jury of your peers, and the rule of law, and property rights, and rights that devolve to the people, the states or the people respectively, if you're going to do that, you can't pull the rule of law out and think this shining city on the hill can stand on the beautiful marble pillars of American exceptionalism with one pillar knocked out. That pillar that is the rule of law cannot be destroyed. And our job is to refurbish them all, because there are people in this country are grabbing those and taking their keyboard and verbal jackhammers to our beautiful marble pillars of American exceptionalism and breaking down that shining city on the hill. It's happening every day in this country. That's the rule of law part. That's the violent crime part. Now here's the economic part. Go look at the Department of Labor's website. There, you can add up the age groups of those of working age. Let's see, 16 to 19. The last time I looked, there are 9.3 million Americans in that age who are simply not in the workforce. Then it goes 20 to 25, and there's another bunch. You add that up, and you go to the working age Americans. That number now, this is a Stuart Varney number that I heard here about 2 months ago, but it's one I totaled up. 88 million Americans of working age simply not in the workforce, and you add to that the unemployed, and now you're over 100 million Americans of working age simply not in the workforce. They could be the unemployed, they could be people that are early retired, they could be homemakers, they could be in school, they could be handicapped, but that still leaves tens of millions of Americans to help pull the wagon instead of ride in it. But they're riding in it because we have 80 different, that's 80 different federal means-tested welfare programs. 80. No one can memorize the numbers. They can't memorize the names of them, so they don't understand how they all work together. No one understands that either. But we borrow money from the Chinese to hand it out to people that are riding along in this society, while we look around and say there aren't enough Americans to do the work. Well, George and others talked about it, not enough Americans. There's plenty of Americans do the work. Ron actually hit that point the clearest. Of 100 million Americans of working age not in the workforce, we think we need to import tens of millions of others. 11 million, 22 million, 33 million according to NumbersUSA, 44 or 55 million, probably closer by the time the family reunification thing kicks in. Why? What's the purpose? To benefit elitists, political power brokers, employers of illegals. And by the way, the people that think like this, I just had this little narrative I wanted to tell you. This little iPhone here, although it was a BlackBerry at the time. I found myself sitting across the table from Bill Gates as he wanted to discuss with some of the members, 4 or 5 of us, the immigration policy in Congress. And so as I sat there and listened to, at the time I think also the richest man in the world, and I thought, well, like about people that are doing things, so I had my BlackBerry underneath the table and I did my email while I'm listening to him, looking up and down and doing that. And then I thought, well, would the richest man in the world be offended if I'm doing my email while he's trying to talk to me? And then I thought, you know what, isn't he the guy that invented multitasking? And so how can he take offense if I'm doing my email while he's talking to me and I'm operating with a split screen, because he wanted to legalize a lot of people to do work that apparently Americans don't want to do, like computer work. So, you know, the highest unemployment though exists in the lowest skills. And the Amnesty Act of the Gang of 8 brings in more low-skilled people. Labor is a commodity like corn or beans where I come from, or oats or gold or hay or petroleum, or platinum for that matter. It trades in the marketplace by supply and demand, and the value of labor is determined by supply and demand. And these people that are the well-to-do elitists, they understand that. So they want to flood the labor supply to keep the wages down, and in doing so, that helps their profit margin come up. Here are the numbers out of Robert Rector at the Heritage Foundation. An average family of 4 headed by a high school dropout will be a net cost to the taxpayer of about $35,000 a year. And here's an average, let's say an average illegal immigrant would be to have a 10th grade education, be 34 years old. So, you know, here's the numbers. For each individual that fits that category, we're subsidizing their standard of living, they're living in America, to the tune of $11,600 a year. That's the subsidy. So when you have cheap labor, you've got borrow the money from the Chinese to help supplement the paycheck that's coming from the person that they're working for to the tune of $11,600 a year. And this is all a good equation? There is no part of this that's a good equation. And the Cato economists and some people that are advocating for this on my side of the aisle, they will say, well, we need to increase America's birth rate. So the only way we can do that is, we're going to subsidize contraceptives under Obamacare. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it, if our birth rate's too low? And then we'll bring in a lot of people that have a higher birth rate, and we'll go from 1.9 to 2.4. A certain congressman from Wisconsin just made this statement a while back. And then by necessarily they believe if you increase your population, you'll grow your economy. Well, only if one of them works for an hour. That's all that's required. If one of the 11, 22, 33, or up to 55 million works for 1 hour, they increase the GDP. Well, that's nice. Now we can say they grew our economy. But $11,600 per person is the cost to us, and they cannot sustain themselves in this society without a college education. That's the economics. And 13% of their children will go to college. That's also the statistical fact. So we sit here with an illogical, let's say a flawed premise, and an illogical conclusion, and the smartest people in the world with a flawed premise are going to end up with an even more flawed conclusion. So if we take these, if we bring in these 11, 22, or 55 million people, 10th grade education, average age 34, plunk them into our economy, they drive down the job market, drive down the wages, but they're going to grow our economy by a little bit in the GDP, even though it's a net loss to the taxpayer. And the argument is, if we don't do this, our country can't succeed. So let me see, if there was a country that was doing the opposite of this, wouldn't they be the country that's, wait a minute, let me put it this way. If a country is exporting its young people in direct contradiction to the philosophy of bringing in an unlimited supply of immigration, wouldn't you think that country then would have its economy at least declining, if not collapsing? So we know that countries south, Mexico, for example, have been exporting, especially their young people, for a long time to this country, by the millions. And so let me see. The unemployment rate in the United States, 7.6%. Not much of a recovery, Mr. President. The unemployment rate in Mexico, 5%. The growth rate in America, down there real close to 1%. Growth rate in Mexico, up there nearly 4%. So tell me how it is that Mexico can sustain the colossal mistake that our elitists think they're making while we are sliding along and not recovering and perhaps going backwards while we're committing this act that they say is good for us. It's because they're wrong, just in case you didn't come to that conclusion. They're wrong. We need to refurbish the pillars of American exceptionalism. Free enterprise is not forgiving. We cannot be a socialist state. We cannot be a cradle-to-grave welfare state. And it was Milton Friedman that told us that an open borders policy and a welfare state are not compatible with each other. And so which is it going to be? Well, let's take that hammock that used to be a safety net, lower it down. Let's get some of those people that are riding along in the wagon, get them out and get them in the harness and they can pull the wagon. Let's do that. Let's secure our borders. We can do that with the resources we're spending now. And let's do our interior enforcement. Let's restore the rule of law. Let's restore the dignity of the American citizen, and let's restore the destiny of the American nation. We know what to do. We have to convince them what's right. Let's go out and do that. Thank you so much for being here tonight. God bless you all.
Thank you, Congressman. Kevin Martin has been stuck on Interstate 95 for about 4 hours. Come up here, Kevin. And it would be a shame not to have a few words from Kevin. Kevin is an entrepreneur and is part of BALA, the Black American Leadership Alliance. Finish us off with a few concerns here about jobs.
Sure. Patriots, thank you for being very patient with me this evening. Each and every one of you here is a hero in my mind. I came before you today to speak to you about the job aspects of what amnesty will do. In 1986, I was in the 10th, 11th grade. We were told that, amnesty was a one-time thing. It, 3 million, bring these people out of the life, yada, yada, you heard it. Well, after I went to college and bumped around and got a couple of jobs later on in life, I found out that the job market was competitive. It used to be you went to high school, you came out, you got an entry-level job, you made it for the summer, you went to college, 4 years later, you got a nice job. That was the American dream. It's not like that anymore. There is no way right now, when you look at this current job data that has come out in the last 4 years, that anyone could be for amnesty. Okay, 90% of the jobs that have been created are part-time. This is the president's own Department of Labor saying this. But now he's pushing amnesty. Each one of you look around. Don't think that amnesty doesn't affect you. Do you have children? Who has children here? Grandchildren? How many of them in the 7th grade right now? Come on, raise your hand. 7th, 8th, 9th grade? So it's 10-year path to citizenship, right? Okay, let's see. 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 4 years college. Who are they going to compete with when they get out? They're not going to be competing with their peers. Well, of course, the employers say, well, we got to get these people out of here because they're already in the system. That's bunk. These people should be going home. Okay, they came here, they broke their law. We don't give amnesty to bank robbers. We don't give amnesty to armed robbery. We don't give amnesty to drug kingpins. We don't even, my God, we found Whitey Bulger, an 82-year-old man, guilty today. Yeah, he did kill a couple of people, but still. Hey, if there ever was somebody who needed amnesty at 82 years old, I think Whitey Bulger would be in. Okay, but even I don't agree with that. I'm just a joke there. But what I'm trying to say to you is, if we allow amnesty, they told us, they lied to us the first time. They told us in 1986 that it was going to be a one-time deal, one time only. Everyone believed that. If you allow them to pass amnesty right now, I am in the business world. I am a businessman. There is plenty of unskilled labor. I work in construction. I'll tell you what I do. I do remediation. Asbestos, lead-based paint. A lot of my workers are Hispanic. All of them have green cards when they work for me. Or working visas, whatever you want to call them. Okay, but there are a lot of other companies that don't do that. They're interested in this, the bottom line, the bottom dollar. And it just isn't the small business, it's the corporations too. Look at it like this, when you call PNC Bank, Bank of America, what does it tell you? For English, press 1. For Spanish, press 2. They're even adding Chinese if you press 3. What the hell is going on? To quote Sheriff Buford T. Justice, what in the hell has the world come to? When I live in America, I speak English, but I gotta press 1 to speak in English. I was taught English in school. Yeah, I do have black skin, but I was taught English in school. That's what I speak. Why the hell when I get on the phone should I have to press 2, 3? Why do I need a code? Okay, because it's very, very easy to say for an employer to go, and everyone knows where this is going. It happened in '86 in the business world. These people want to be citizens, some of them do. Okay, they get hired. Business, they cause a problem at the business. They want more benefits, they want more money. Okay, when you're trying to get citizenship, you're less likely to strike. You're less likely to demand real wages. Okay, you're keeping the wages automatically low for all those people, Americans who are coming out of college, who are coming out of high school, who want to live the collegiate dream, who want to go into something better. Right now, we have people coming out of college who are working in Olive Gardens, but have law degrees. We have people who have corporate management skills, but are working in Wendy's. Okay, through no fault of their own, I will tell you that. Recessions happen, believe me. But why are the congressional members this gang of 8? Okay, and they're nothing more than a bunch of snakes. And if you spell snake sideways, it's spelled sneak. They're trying to sneak this bill through. They got these corrupt businesses behind them. Why won't they send it over to the House so it can be blue slip? Because they want to get it in the conference like they did in 1986, get all their little business friends together, and the business friends go down that little line and white out whatever they don't want or cross out whatever they don't want. That includes border enforcement. That includes visa restrictions or anything else. They want open borders. Okay, and your wages and the wages of your children, the wages of your grandchildren are going to suffer because of it. Okay? Not only that, your Social Security, your Medicare, your retirement, your TRICARE. Oh, I'm ex-military too. All those other wonderful benefits that you worked hard to get are going to be given to somebody else who just simply walked across the border, took a job that someone gave him, and said, hey, not only do I get citizenship, I get your benefits. We at BALA are saying we saw what happened in 1986, and minorities were hit hard. We were hit hard. I lived through what we call the 10 years of crack wars, because young men and women found it easier to sell dime bags of crack on the street than try to go get a job, because most of them couldn't find a job. And if you talk to any college student today, they will tell you that they put in 25, 35, 45, 50 resumes. And all they do is say, we'll keep you on file, and if we need you, we'll call you. Now you tell me, if you're a 23-year-old, 24-year-old student who has gone to college, made the dean's list, and every time you go to apply for a job, someone said, well, we'll call you when, unless your name is Clinton, Bush, or Obama, or someone like that, then your children don't get jobs on Madison Avenue and places like that. Okay, they don't get to go to Stanford, but still. Okay, how would you feel? That's going to be your children one day. I'm telling you, as a businessman, this is going to be your children and grandchildren in 10 years if this crap passes. Your children are going to be out there, well, Grandpa, I put in an application again today and they didn't hire me. And if you sit here and say, well, ain't nothing I can do about it, then you know what? You look at your children, your grandchildren in the face 10 years from now when they can't get a job. And whose fault will it be then? Ask yourself that. Okay, ask yourself why 90% of the jobs that have been created in the last 4 years are part-time jobs. Okay, where are these illegals going? Where are they going to line up and get jobs at? I mean, my God, most of the time where I live at in Maryland, which is a sanctuary state, hell, I had to go to McDonald's. I need a daggone translator. I had to repeat my order 3 times just to get it right. And I know I'm not borrowing Joe Biden's joke. I'm telling you how it is in Maryland. And not only on top of that, what are we going to do with these young people who are unemployed? Not only black, we're talking white, all Americans of all creeds. If you look at youth unemployment today, it's over 50%. Employers, well, I do. I want to hire my young people out of my community because young people make the world go round, in my opinion. Okay, but employers say, oh, well, we'll hold out for amnesty, and that way we'll hire whoever we want. And when they cause trouble, we'll get rid of them. Okay, no illegal's going to go to the Department of Labor and file a complaint when they're trying to get citizenship. They only want that citizenship. So what I'm saying to you is the economic, if you look at these job numbers right now, as a businessman, I can look at these economic numbers right now, and there's no way you can support amnesty. No logical way. Okay, anybody with 2 brain cells can figure that. And if you do support amnesty, then you're a special kind of stupid with these kind of numbers coming out here. Let's get unemployment down. Let's demand that these politicians put Americans first. Stop putting their party and politics before everything else. Stop putting these illegals first, because we are the people who sent them to Washington. Okay, and understand this. Jobs today, driver's license tomorrow, benefits the next day. Why do you think they said, well, we'll get them a driver's license? Driver's license is the first step to voting. And do you think for 1 minute they're going to vote that golden goose? They're going to vote that golden goose dead. But do you think they're going to vote against that golden goose? Oh, heck no. President Obama knows that. The Gang of 8 know that. And some of the Republican establishment know it as well. But we here are gathered today. We're not that stupid. And we're not going to fool me once, your fault, 1986. Fool me twice in 2013, your fault. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a word from the real knowledge with the business. We're going to end. Shonda Weary from the Tea Party Patriots is going to send us off.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. And thank you, Congressman King, for coming. We really appreciate your leadership on this issue. My name is Shonda Weary. I am with Tea Party Patriots. We co-sponsored this event with the Remembrance Project, who we heard from tonight, also NumbersUSA, so thank you, Roy, and Eagle Forum. So thank you very much, Ellen Marie. We are hosting these events throughout August recess, and we're going to be posting them on our website. It's teapartypatriots.org. In contrast to the Democrats in the Senate who think it's appropriate to just ram bills through, we actually think it's important to come together as communities and talk about these issues. So, and one of the things that we really appreciate, Laura, thank you so much for coming, and we know how hard that was to share your story, but thank you sincerely. Maria wanted me to share one final thing with you all. It's this, I'm not sure if you can see now that it's dark, but this is the third year that there will be a National Day of Remembrance for the family members of crimes committed by illegal immigrants. And this poster that she brought has pictures of all of the family members that will be participating. It's November 3rd. You can get more information about that from Maria. But again, thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate it. Have a great night.